No excuses, no more letting trolls in my head, no more giving up, no more switching things, no more looking for a way out. I am all in. I am going to know for 100% sure what my genetics are capable of. How big could I have gotten? How strong could I have gotten if I went all in? If I sacrificed everything, everything, everything. If I sacrificed everything, how big, how strong? I will have the answer to that question.
This video is the story of Izzy Narvaez, a YouTuber formerly known as PowerliftingToWin. First, I'm going to outline the course of events that took Izzy from his beginnings on YouTube to his tragic end destination. Second, I'm going to explore what we can learn from Izzy's plight. And last, I'll share why it's important to talk about Izzy. Timestamps for each chapter are given below. Izzy Narvaez set forth on YouTube in 2014 as the channel PowerliftingToWin. Izzy garnered a following of some 40,000 subscribers with his informative content that centered around powerlifting. Personally, I liked Izzy's videos, and so did a lot of other folks. He was articulate, clear, and thorough in his PowerliftingToWin videos, and so it's not for no reason that he had the following he did.
Blaha makes it very clear this is a novice bodybuilding program, and for that purpose, it's set up pretty well. But this is clearly not intended for powerlifters. Not only that.
Although Izzy did one cycle of special sports supplements in his early 20s,
I did my first cycle of steroids in my early 20s. I, at the time, really had no idea what I was doing, and I was not a good candidate to be going on my first steroid cycle. I mean, I was absurdly fat at the time as well, and the steroids definitely didn't help with that because my nutrition was so shit. I thought that 60 chicken nuggets from McDonald's was a good idea.
he competed drug-free for most of his competitive powerlifting career. Izzy was by no means world-class in competitive powerlifting, but he was undeniably good. In 2018, in the 75 kilo weight class, Izzy would attain a raw total of 600 kilos with a 215 kilo squat, a 135 kilo bench, and a 250 kilo deadlift. Barring the insane standards on the internet, this is a seriously commendable achievement for a natural male lifter of Izzy's weight. It's a level of strength that you'd be very hard-pressed to find in a commercial gym. Impressive though Izzy's natural achievements were, they evidently weren't enough for him, based on the decisions he would later make. Careful observers might note that the writing was on the wall the entire time. In 2014, when Izzy began his channel, he announced that he wanted to be an IPF world champion one day, which is a lofty ambition indeed, achievable only by athletes who are genetically gifted and/or good at passing drug tests. More on this later.
My goals going forward are to compete at a high level in the IPF. I'd like to be a world champion, and to be honest,
Izzy stopped posting program reviews and eventually, much to the dismay of his followers, stopped posting videos altogether. That is up until June 2019, when Izzy emerged from a year-long period of hibernation, looking noticeably more muscular, in a video titled, Why You Should Join IzzyNarvaez.com.
everyone that joins the forum will have to pay, so there will be no trolls, and there'll be no risk of anybody getting reported for talking about drugs or something like that, because it won't be on Facebook. Number two is that
In the video description, he announces that PowerliftingToWin is dead, and IzzyNarvaez.com is born. I regret to point out that as of the making of this video in 2024, the link to Izzy's site is broken. Anyway, the audience reception to this video was mostly negative, pointing out the disconnect between how Izzy built his audience in the first place and the new direction of his content. Additionally, there was criticism of Izzy's drug abuse. In a subsequent video posted later that month launching his new Lose a Pound Per Day ebook, someone in the comments asked Izzy if he could explain why he decided to go enhanced. And Izzy decided that he'd do just that in a video titled The Dark Side, My Motivation to Use.
Izzy, why? Why did you decide to join the dark side? Why did you decide to start using PEDs? And to answer that, I have to take us back to...
The reasons Izzy gives for going enhanced are these. First, he's going enhanced to dampen the shame he feels over not committing 100% to his goal of becoming an IPF world champion.
I naively got in front of the camera and declared that it was my goal to one day be an IPF world champion. The progress that I've made towards that goal is the deepest source of shame in my entire life. I would have been perfectly happy if I would have given it everything that I had and come up 50% short of the world champion. I did not do the things that I needed to do to find out what my genetics were capable of.
Second, despite people knowing Izzy as a coach, what Izzy wants most of all is to be an athlete, and he believes that going enhanced lets him be an athlete.
Look, you guys love me as Izzy the Powerlifting to Win guy, Izzy the teacher, Izzy the guru, Izzy the guy that reviews programs. But I never wanted to be just a teacher. I never wanted to be a teacher at all. I wanted to be an athlete. I want to be an athlete again. That's why I'm doing this. This lets me be an athlete again, and I feel so damn good about it.
Third, Izzy has a desire to find out what his genetics are capable of if he gives it his all as an enhanced athlete.
Well, now I'm at a point in my life where I don't care about my genetics anymore. I have this deep regret and this deep longing to know, what can I do as an athlete if I turn over every stone, every leaf, if I push every button, if I go after everything 100%, perfect nutrition, perfect sleep, perfect training. Right now I'm training 3 times a day, eating 6 meals on a clock, taking everything that I need to take in the dose that I need to take them, like a pro would. I am living a pro lifestyle. I want to be the guy who people look at and said he got more out of his genetics than anyone else in history. That's my new goal. I want to find out what I'm capable of if I give it my all, so that when I am 40 and my body's breaking down, I don't have to look back and regret and wonder what could have been. I'll never have to ask any question about what could have been.
Izzy believes that he'll regret not finding out what his genetics are capable of when he's on his deathbed.
So that when I die, I have no regrets about not knowing, not once pushing myself to be the best athlete that I could be.
Last, Izzy wants to be, in his own words, big, strong, and jacked.
I looked up to Ed Cohn, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Ronnie Coleman. And 10 years into this lifting game, I don't want to pretend like all my motivations are so high-minded and pure. I want to be big, I want to be strong, and I want to be jacked.
Izzy's performance here is positively Shakespearean. He has a real rhetorical flair, and he's very well spoken. I mean that sincerely. I believe that this video is Izzy's pièce de résistance, and for whatever failures that came later, he can look back on his sanguine performance here and be proud.
Hopefully you guys follow along the journey and you get the answer to that question as well. And those of you who want to follow and see what I'm capable of when I give it my heart and soul, thank you so much for following. Let's find out what happens.
In contrast to his previous videos released that same month, the audience reception was much more positive. Most of the comments were wishing Izzy well on his journey and applauding his honesty. Izzy would continue posting a few more videos on his Powerlifting to Win channel. In one of them, he explained that his ultimate goal was to become a hybrid bodybuilder/powerlifter in a similar vein to his idols such as Larry Wheels, Ben Pollack, Stan Efferding, and Ronnie Coleman.
My goal for the future is actually to be a quote-unquote dual sport athlete. I'd like to be the best powerlifter that I can and also the best bodybuilder that I can, in the vein of somebody like Larry Wheels or Stan Efferding or Ben Pollack. These are the guys that I tend to look up to and want to be like. My goal is to be a dual sport athlete. I would like to compete in bodybuilding and powerlifting at the same time. So I guess what you can call me is a true power builder. I'm looking to do both in the vein of Larry Wheels.
And with that, there was radio silence on the Powerlifting to Win channel. Izzy followed through with his promise to go all in on his goal of being the best possible enhanced hybrid bodybuilder slash powerlifter he could be. I don't know precisely when his new website, IzzyNarvaez.com, went under, though based on the snapshots I retrieved from Wayback Machine, it's likely that it was sometime in 2020. Izzy began to post regularly to his Instagram page starting in March 2021. Although Izzy didn't post anything for about 1.5 years, not posting anything in the year 2020, and his most recent post before then, being this one from October 2019, it's obvious looking at Izzy's pictures and videos that his anabolic cocktail did something in that time. Izzy gained noticeable size and strength and climbed up to a lean 215 pounds at his height of 5'7". However, Izzy would spend most of his time considerably fatter than his lean 215 pound state, going all the way up to 260 plus pounds. Izzy would owe some of this astronomical weight gain to his voracious appetite, going as far as to call it an oversight that his former bodybuilding coach Dusty let him eat occasional free meals at restaurants.
I think what happened is the coach just underestimated how much I can eat in one sitting, because I'm sort of an outlier in that regard. I can easily put down 5,000, 10,000 calories in one sitting. And I was sending in update pictures the whole time, and he was saying, this looks fine, until it didn't. Obviously, I wouldn't do it again if I had the chance.
Izzy's drug abuse and weight gain would change his face. In contrast to Izzy's earlier, more conventional fitness model look, he began to resemble comic book guy from The Simpsons, and indeed, Izzy seemed to revel in his new status as a freak, or in his own words, a troll-like creature.
So as you can see here, troll-like creatures with steroid-induced moon face should probably not have a clean-shaven face and be bald.
Somehow Izzy's voice changed too, which commenters didn't hesitate to point out. Compared to before, Izzy's voice became nasally, as if constantly congested.
The tips, the tricks, the tactics, the diets, the programs.
What I want to do in this video is announce my latest ebook. It is Lose a Pound of Fat Per Day.
How did you pass third grade, like reading comprehension? You can't extrapolate anything. I literally answered that question and any other question about any other accessory exercise in the answer. It's just like mind blowing. Do I need to like write out every single thing? Are you capable of extrapolating a single idea out of a paragraph that's related to the question at all?
Far from the public reception that Izzy's idols such as Larry Wheels and Ronnie Coleman would receive, Izzy would remark nonchalantly on how people in the general public, more often than not, couldn't tell him apart from an obese non-bodybuilder.
You guys have to understand that the average person who doesn't lift weights doesn't put things into relative perspective. They're not going to go, oh, 235 pounds at 5'7", that's huge. They're just going to go, that's a 235, 240 pound man, of which there are many and of which they see them every single day. I don't look like a bodybuilder, like a pro bodybuilder. I don't have pro bodybuilder size. I don't have pro powerlifter size. And I don't look like an NFL player. I'm not big.
I think Izzy was being too hard on himself here. But he held himself to a high standard. When a troll called one of his gym lifts weak, Izzy would agree to some extent, writing in response that he wasn't impressed by his own strength. Whatever strength Izzy had, it didn't come cost-free. Izzy struggled so badly with obstructive sleep apnea, owing to his size, that he had to sleep with a CPAP mask.
I had very, very bad sleep apnea. A AHI score of 35 is considered severe sleep apnea, and that's roughly 35 breathing events, so interrupted breathing per hour. Mine was over 100. I had over 100 interrupted breathing events per hour.
But this wouldn't be the end of Izzy's troubles. Izzy would write in a February 2022 post that he was waking up 6 to 10 times a night to wee. This is a medical condition called nocturia, and it can be caused by diabetes. As you can see from this comparison photo, the veins in Izzy's arms and shoulders began to resemble ramen noodles after he went full throttle with the drugs and weight gain. These are called varicose veins, And besides being a far cry from what's considered aesthetic in competitive bodybuilding,
What's the story with his veins and the calves and the front? I've never seen that before.
Yeah, so
But there's definitely something going on there. It's a little bit too thick, those veins.
yeah.
I would definitely have this checked out.
the sudden development of varicose veins can point toward cardiovascular issues such as chronic hypertension or venous insufficiency. But Izzy stated in a Q&A that he'd made peace with the fact that chasing his dreams would slash years from his life expectancy.
Now, that's not to say I want to die like 15 years earlier or anything, but if I trade, say, 5 years off of my life to chase my dreams, that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. We have to make these decisions for ourselves.
Whether or not you realize your dreams, it can be a thrill to chase them. But what if you can't chase them? What if fate says no to your grand ambitions? Let's find out in the next section of this chapter. The height of Izzy's fame as an enhanced lifter would come when he featured in 3 workout videos on the Renaissance Periodisation YouTube channel, which garnered some tens of thousands of views. Although I'm certainly no fan of Dr. Mike Israetel's, I can hardly dispute his advice to Izzy in these workouts. Control the weight on the way down, pause at the bottom, go through a full range of motion. Basically, lift in such a way that you stimulate muscle growth without undue joint and connective tissue damage. Izzy needed this advice and vowed to take Mike's advice on board in an Instagram post published 29th of March 2022, writing that he needs to stop making excuses for ego lifting, everything controlled, everything paused. See, before this workout with Mike, Izzy had been plagued with various injuries that were brought about by a reckless style of training. Izzy's training was low volume, consisting of one heavy, all-out set with loose technique for each body part, to which he'd try adding weight every session, as if a novice lifter doing Mark Ripeto's starting strength. Indeed, the title of one of Izzy's later books, One More Pound, roughly encapsulates his approach to bodybuilding training. Add 1 more pound to the bar every session. This is in stark contrast to the way that most high-level enhanced bodybuilders train, who favor lighter pump and squeeze training to spare their joints and connective tissues. Izzy would routinely complain about a recurring pec tendon injury from bench pressing. In June 2021, Izzy would write that he felt his pec twinge doing a set of Smith machine close grip bench press. In July of 2021, Izzy would write that his pec was very, very close to tearing, and therefore he should come off his cycle. The very next month, in August of 2021, Izzy would write that he made a foolish decision taking a bench press set to failure. In particular, that he shouldn't be pushing that hard with his pec yet. A mere 9 days later, on the 24th of August 2021, Izzy would write that he strained his other pec. The very next month, in September 2021, Izzy would write that he re-strained his left pec, doing bench press. In October 2021, Izzy finally decided that he'd take it easy with the bench pressing, hit the restart button, and try to get himself into what he calls decent shape for Halloween. Fast forward several months. In April 2022, Izzy would write that he strained his pec minor doing Romanian deadlift. Later that month, he would write that his pec minor actively hurt when doing bench press, and that doing bench press the day after Romanian deadlift is dumb. In May 2022, Izzy would write that he got throbbing biceps tendonitis from Smith machine squats. In April 2023, Izzy would write that he got a pec twinge doing a machine chest press. Mike Israetel would go out of his way to comment on Izzy's posts, politely cautioning him against training in such a foolhardy manner. For all Mike's histrionics, he doesn't actually train that close to failure, and lifts weights that are light for him. This is a smart approach to lifting for someone who's megadosing special sports supplements, which both of these gentlemen do. Although Izzy vowed to take Mike's advice on board, his new commitment to lifting with good technique wouldn't last for very long, and Izzy would later embrace his status as a self-proclaimed ego lifter, that is, someone who lifts heavier than he has to for bodybuilding or powerlifting purposes, and at his own expense, in order to satisfy his ego. Izzy justified his ego lifting on these grounds. 1. Everyone trains for ego satisfaction, so he's fundamentally no different to those who lift with good technique, since good technique is an ego stroke in its own right.
All lifting to some degree is ego lifting. Why do I say that? Because why do you need big, beautiful looking muscles if you're a bodybuilder or a physique athlete?
2. His style of training has given him good results.
Personally, I think I've gotten pretty good results over the last 3 years with my quote-unquote ego lifting. It's not like I'm getting zero results.
3. He enjoys the way he trains.
So if it makes you happy and you like it, then who really cares if somebody calls it ego lifting? I just like it, man. It makes me happy. Okay?
And 4. His critics may not have perfect nutrition and sleep.
Don't call them an ego lifter. And it's like, well, it's not for pure hypertrophy. You're doing things that are optimal for pure hypertrophy. The vast majority of people who say that don't even have a 100% perfect nutrition plan. They aren't 100% perfect about sleep.
Later in this video, I'll pick apart Izzy's justification for his ego lifting. For now, I'll concentrate on the outcome of it. In April 2023, Izzy would rupture his distal biceps tendon doing a set of preacher curls. This biceps tear set Izzy back several weeks of productive training, since he needed surgery to reattach his biceps to the distal tendon. In addition to getting surgery, Izzy would inject special recovery peptides to accelerate his healing.
I get asked all the time, what do you attribute your fast recovery to? And so I wanted to go over that. Number one, I did use healing peptides such as BPC 157 and TB 500.
The prognosis was looking good, and eventually, Izzy was back to normal training. Well, inasmuch as Izzy's weird training could ever be considered normal. Or at least he would have been, had he not tweaked his pec tendon doing bench press in September 2023, immediately after his biceps recovered. Izzy would continue training his upper body hard through his pec tendon issues, and in October 2023, as if you didn't see it coming, he ruptured his pec tendon completely, requiring surgery. This time, there would be no training through it. There would be no special peptide-accelerated recovery. Finally, Izzy had paid a price for his ego lifting, too great to train through. This brings us to the present day. Izzy hasn't posted anything to his social media for almost a year now. This is a big change, considering that, prior to his injury, he was posting prolifically, with daily Q&As and a stream of progress reports. He got surgery for his pec tendon, and I wish him a speedy recovery. But these injuries are hard to recover from. From an outside perspective, the prognosis looks bleak. Of course, it's certainly possible that Izzy's working on making a silent comeback to bodybuilding. I can only speculate. However, there are some things Izzy said that might hint toward him not making a comeback. For instance, Izzy seems to recognize at some level how destructive his bodybuilding lifestyle is, comparing enhanced bodybuilders to alcoholics.
From what I've seen, the vast majority of people that keep trying to lift, they just relapse, man, and they go back on cycle and they can't stop. And I can see why. Imagine that you were an alcoholic and you just keep going to the bar to hang out and play pool, but you're just not going to have a drink. Yeah, fucking right, man.
And arguing that, for almost everyone, there's no good reason to take up enhanced bodybuilding.
Again, like, what are you doing this for? What are you doing this for? Unless you're the kind of person that's so sure about this, that all the things that I just said you're willing to deal with because you know that's like your life's purpose. That is what you want to go after. You are going to spend your life focused on bodybuilding, on powerlifting, on strength culture. You have no doubt whatsoever. That is what you want. The better question is, why would you do steroids? What is any sensible reason that makes any good sense for the average person who's not seeking employment in the fitness industry, who's not going to make a living in the fitness industry? because it seems fun, it's not fun.
Although ostensibly Izzy is answering a question in a Q&A here, I prefer to interpret Izzy's conversation as a soliloquy. He's talking to himself. It's as if we're listening to Izzy's superego expressing doubts about continuing with bodybuilding.
What are you really doing all of this for? Are you ever going to get paid from it? Are you going to be a professional bodybuilder? Because if not, then what you're going to be doing is sinking thousands of dollars per year for a cosmetic effect on your hobby. And again, what are you really getting out of this? You're risking dying sooner. You're risking infertility. You're risking needing TRT for life.
Izzy fails according to most of his own criteria for enhanced bodybuilding being a rational lifestyle choice. Izzy's social media presence evaporated after he went enhanced, what with his PowerliftingToWin audience abandoning him, and more of his uploads than not failing to crack 1,000 views on YouTube. I dare say Izzy would be painfully aware of the fact that he's not doing well enough in the fitness industry to justify his choices rationally. The fact that Izzy displays this degree of introspection suggests that he might be rethinking things. Against that, Izzy would also say that he keeps bodybuilding not to achieve his earlier goals, but rather because he finds it fun.
I'm long past my dream physique when I started. I'm way past the strength goals that I set when I started. But that's not what keeps me going anymore. It's not like, oh man, if I could just fix this little thing about my physique. I just keep going because it's fun and I like it. It's not because I need more.
Clearly, Izzy was conflicted, oscillating between optimism and pessimism, at once arguing that bodybuilding is fun and also that it isn't. I'm not foreclosing on the possibility of Izzy healing his pec 100%, making a comeback to bodybuilding, achieving all of the goals he originally set out with, and proving the naysayers wrong. After all, Izzy stated that he was willing to commit to enhanced bodybuilding for 10 years straight.
And it isn't going to be a 3-month or 6-month stretch. This is something that I want to do for 10 years. For 10 years. Straight. You know, maybe I'll have my answer sooner than that. I don't know.
And we're currently at year 5. But is it likely that Izzy will make this miraculous comeback? Well, we can try to answer that question by examining Izzy's enhanced journey so far.
And Ruby, I sacrificed everything.
As a reminder, Izzy initially set forth in 2019, at age 28, with the goal of reaching his genetic potential without qualification.
No qualifications. No natty qualification. No only training 3 times a week qualification. No qualifications. I'm all in 100% every day, every week, every month, every year. I'm all in. I want to see. I want to know.
And being a hybrid bodybuilder/powerlifter in a similar vein to Ronnie Coleman, Stan Efferding, Ben Pollack, and Larry Wheels. Did Izzy achieve a ripped and muscular physique like his idols? Well, Izzy might argue not, since he states that he's not big, and that people in the general public, more often than not, can't tell him apart from an obese non-bodybuilder. Personally, I wouldn't go that far. However, if you put Izzy next to his idols, it's clear that he still has some way to go. Actually, if anything, he looked more like his idols at the beginning of his quest compared to the end. Did Izzy achieve anything of note in competitive bodybuilding or powerlifting like his idols? No. He has 0 untested competitive bodybuilding or powerlifting achievements to speak of. For all Izzy's talk about kicking people's asses on game day,
I think that's an advantage, and I think that adds up over time, and I think I'm going to kick those people's ass when it's game time. So,
in the end, there was never even a game day to kick people's asses on, since he never competed. Did Izzy reach his genetic potential and his goal of being remembered as the guy who made more of his genetics than anyone else? No. He couldn't even train long enough to reach his genetic potential, since his training would riddle him with injuries so bad that he couldn't lift weights and needed surgery. Last, Izzy has slashed a considerable number of years from his life expectancy with his harmful choices.
How big could I have gotten? How strong could I have gotten if I went all in? If I sacrificed everything, everything, if I sacrificed everything, how big, how strong?
In the end, Izzy sacrificed everything to gain nothing. His story was a tragedy indeed. But what can we learn from it? I'll explore that question in the next chapter, where I critically analyze Izzy's poor choices. In this chapter, I'll outline some practical and philosophical takeaways from the tragedy of Izzy Narvaez. There's a lot to say. There are things wrong with Izzy's goals, and there are also things wrong with the ways he pursued them. I'll discuss both. Izzy is wrong to assert that nobody knows what he'll be capable of if he goes enhanced.
What could I really do if I gave 100%? Nobody knows. You don't know my genetics. I don't know my genetics. I just want to know, for me, to have that question.
Or at least, he's more wrong than he is right. Izzy is only right to the extent that, yes, you can't be a clairvoyant and peer into a crystal ball to find out exactly what your genetic potential is. But you can know enough about your genetics from a few years of natural training to get a decent idea of how you'd stack up against other Reuters. Consider how Dorian Yates looked just 9 months into training. Consider how Phil Heath looked as a basketballer. These guys would have known they had the genetics to do well long before they jumped on, and well they did. Dorian Yates and Phil Heath are both multiple-time Mr. Olympia winners.
Hey, Solomon Nelson, we're training at 3 o'clock today.
For an example of someone who's not so gifted, how about yours truly, Solomon Nelson? Well, this is me at age 24, with 8.5 years of natural training. I'm proud of what I've achieved, don't get me wrong. But at this point, I think it's very safe to say that I don't have the genetics to do exceptionally well in physique or strength sports. I could do okay, but I couldn't compete against the big shots. At best, I'd probably just end up looking like a budget Bradley Martin or Logan Paul if I geared up. And that's clearly not worth the sacrifice to my health. Now let's come back to Izzy. I think Izzy looked great as a natural, but he was no Dorian Yates, much less a George Hackenschmidt, inventor of the bench press. And if you can't do better than George Hackenschmidt as a natural, with access to modern training and eating protocols, then you should kiss your wannabe Larry Wheels aspirations goodbye. And you should feel good about doing that too, since even if you have the genetics to do well as an enhanced lifter, it's a questionable goal to have in the first place, which I'll get to later. To summarize my point about genetics, there's no point deluding yourself into thinking that you need to jump on to find out roughly what your genetic potential is. If Izzy had the genetics to do well as an enhanced lifter, then he'd have already known before jumping on, as with anyone else. Izzy gets a lot right in the gym. Most notably, he is 100% correct to emphasize progressive tension overload above all. He was always pushing for PRs in weight or reps, which is a smart goal over the long term. But keep that over the long term qualification in mind. Because although Izzy was smart to focus on PRs, the way he went about pushing for them was irresponsible. Izzy would try to PR on one heavy, all-out set to failure every single time he set foot in the gym. This approach injured him badly. And when you consider that there are other ways of achieving progressive overload that are far less likely to result in injury, Izzy's training begins to look foolish. For instance, instead of doing one heavy set of touch-and-go bench press to failure for his chest, he could have done 4 sets of 12 machine chest press with a controlled tempo, leaving a few reps in reserve on each set, and with standardized rest intervals. You can still add weight over time to this 4 sets of 12 scheme with objective, quantifiable performance metrics, just like the 1 set to failure, and thus achieve progressive overload, only it's in a much safer way. So why did Izzy ego lift? Well, he states that it's because he enjoys ego lifting and it's given him good results.
Personally, I think I've gotten pretty good results over the last 3 years with my quote-unquote ego lifting. It's not like I'm getting 0 results. I just like it, man. It makes me happy. Okay.
Here's the thing, though. On the results front, a training routine can only deliver results, period, for as long as you're able to do it. Sure, Izzy got some results from ego lifting and enjoyed it all the while, but not for very long, thanks to the serious injuries it brought about. Now let's imagine a counterfactual where Izzy didn't ego lift and thus stayed injury-free. Who's happier? The counterfactual Izzy who's still lifting, albeit not as heavy, and making progress? Or the actual Izzy who's not lifting whatsoever thanks to injury and needs surgery? That's a rhetorical question. Izzy would respond unconvincingly to criticisms over his ego lifting with the line that all lifting is ego lifting, even lifting with good technique.
All lifting to some degree is ego lifting. Why do I say that? Because why do you need big, beautiful looking muscles if you're a bodybuilder or a physique athlete?
Here, Izzy is equivocating with the term ego lifting. People mean something specific with the term ego lifting. It's not just any training that satisfies your ego, which is how Izzy uncharitably redefines the term. Instead, it refers to a particular kind of self-destructive, excessively heavy or sloppy training that'll detract from, not add to, your long-term success in the weight room or competitive bodybuilding/powerlifting. But instead of addressing the criticism head-on, Izzy attempts to dodge it with word games. This wins the battle but loses the war, because although Izzy was able to convince himself to keep ego lifting with this weak argumentation, in the end it was only to his detriment, as we've seen from his injuries. To conclude this section, enhanced lifters need to be especially careful in the weight room, since the rate of adaptation in the joints and connective tissues is far outpaced by their rate of muscle growth. Indeed, if you look at enhanced bodybuilders who have had great longevity competing at a high level, one thing they often have in common is an unwillingness to lift super heavy, instead emphasizing lighter pump and squeeze training and letting the drugs and diet do most of the work on the muscle growth front. Izzy would have done well to follow suit. Your body sends you warnings. Izzy had many warnings from his body that he might want to consider slowing down his drug abuse, weight gain, and heavy lifting. Between the recurring pec strains and joint pain, the biceps tear, the varicose veins, the nocturia, and the obstructive sleep apnea, and presumably more that I either forgot, don't know, or wasn't shared to social media by Izzy, there were many signs that Izzy should have changed his approach or stopped altogether, and yet he didn't listen to them. For instance, Izzy had more than an entire year of battling pec strains to figure out that he should take a different approach to lifting, and yet he kept going the way he was, leading him to a full pec tendon rupture requiring surgery. Izzy should have listened to his body's warnings. That way he could have avoided some of this mess. Izzy, with his excessive drug protocol and haphazard weight gain, clearly didn't understand that the bodybuilder is at once both sculptor and clay. You can't just slap on a bunch of clay and call yourself a bodybuilder. It has to go to the right places. To give you some perspective, Izzy's height is 5'7", and he climbed as high as 260 pounds while on drugs. This gives him a soaring BMI of 40.8, morbidly obese. Compare that to 1982 Mr. Olympia winner Samir Banuz, also 5'7", who weighed 205 pounds in contest shape and only climbed to 215 pounds in the off-season. Or, for a contemporary example, consider 2 times classic physique Mr. Olympia champion Breon Ainsley, also 5'7", who only weighs in at around 185 pounds in contest shape. I could keep going. These top-level bodybuilders understand where to put the clay, and so they'd never in their right minds climb as high in body weight as Izzy, lest they wreck their proportions and do worse in competition. Also worth noting is that, in contrast to Izzy himself, not a single one of Izzy's idols sports a high body fat percentage. Izzy complains that he's often mistaken for an obese non-bodybuilder. Izzy's confusion over bigger equals better may be the root of the issue. From a bodybuilding standpoint, he'd do well to return to that more aesthetic, ripped Izzy from 2019. Despite being physically smaller, he'd do better in competition and would look much more muscular in most people's eyes, and would therefore be less likely to be confused for an obese non-bodybuilder. And after all, in quoth Debbie DeAndrea's immortal words,
people have this concept about being big. Big doesn't make you look muscular. Yeah. Lean makes you look muscular. Yeah.
In debates, Izzy will often resort to the argumentum ad hominem fallacy. This is where, rather than addressing the actual substance of your opponent's argument, you deflect it by attacking your opponent's character or behavior. I have several examples of Izzy doing this. Let's start with a familiar one, Izzy's defense of his ego lifting. Izzy points out that his critics may not have perfect sleep or nutrition.
Don't call them an ego lifter. And it's like, well, it's not for pure hypertrophy. You're doing things that are optimal for pure hypertrophy. The vast majority of people who say that don't even have a 100% perfect nutrition plan. They aren't 100% perfect about sleep.
That may be true, but that doesn't mean his critics are wrong. In fact, they're right, however poor their nutrition and sleep may be. Here's another example. When questioned over the health implications of his reckless amateur bodybuilding lifestyle, Izzy points out that his critics may also have done unhealthy things themselves, such as smoking, binge drinking, or overeating.
Why does bodybuilding take more priority than health to you? Man, come on. We are all adults here. Do you seriously not know anyone, like maybe you, for example, who's ever gotten drunk to have more fun on a night out with their friends, or had a couple glasses of wine, maybe one too many even, to celebrate something cool happening? Have you ever gotten high? Have you ever done a gram of in a single weekend at a music festival? No, that one's just me? All right, well, fair enough.
Even if that's true, that doesn't mean his critics are wrong. Whether the criticisms come from a teetotaling stick in the mud, like me, the world's fattest man, or Joe Exotic, is irrelevant. The argument that Izzy's lifestyle is unhealthy should be evaluated on its own merits. Indeed, Izzy's own words could be seen to contradict his actions, because he blasts gear while advising other people to stay natural.
Steroids carry immense potential for harm. The better question is, why would you do steroids? What is any sensible reason that makes any good sense for the average person who's not seeking employment in the fitness industry, who's not going to make a living in the fitness industry? Because it seems fun? It's not fun.
Ironic though this is, this doesn't mean Izzy's advice to stay natural is wrong. There's a practical takeaway from Izzy's fallacious argumentative tactics. It's this: take some responsibility for your actions. If someone criticizes your actions, then don't just look for ways to deflect the criticism by pointing out things that your critic might be doing wrong. Think about whether or not there's a grain of truth in the criticism, however flawed the critic himself or herself may be. If you can justify your actions, then you'll be able to address criticisms directly and not deflect them. Izzy cares too much about whom the criticism comes from and not what the criticism itself is. For instance, when he asks for feedback on his physique progress, he specifies that he wants the feedback to come from physique competitors. Here's what Izzy doesn't understand: that a criticism comes from an anonymous troll versus Eric Lillybridge doesn't speak whatsoever to the quality of the criticism. It's clear that Izzy didn't understand this because he confesses that it broke him when elite powerlifters made fun of him for reviewing their training programs.
I had top-level powerlifters on me, legends on me because I had unfavorable reviews of their buddies' programs, and my confidence was shattered. And along the way, I just believed in that.
If Izzy knew that it didn't matter where criticisms come from, and the only thing that matters is the quality of the criticism itself, then he may have been happier overall, since he'd have been able to brush off weak criticisms and take strong criticisms seriously, regardless of where they come from. Izzy thinks it's bad to be a quitter, that is, someone who gives up on his or her goals.
Are you going to quit? Do you want to have your future or current husband or wife look at you as somebody who just gives up when things get hard? Do you want your kids to look at you as a quitter? Do you want to look at yourself as a quitter?
It's true that quitting can be a bad move. For example, if you're obese and you have the commendable goal to lose weight and become healthier, then it'd be inadvisable and weak to quit a fat loss diet just because you dislike foregoing pizza and wine temporarily. But in other circumstances, quitting is certainly the smartest choice, such as when pursuing your goals is destructive. For instance, we'd all say that a recreational drug addict should give up on his or her goal of chasing the ultimate high, or that an anorexic should give up on becoming as skinny as Jack Skellington. Of course, not all questions of to quit or not to quit are clear cut. For instance, should a gamer quit speedrunning for world records? Tough to say. The answer might be yes or no, depending on many factors. But Izzy criticizes the decision to quit too harshly, labeling people who quit pejoratively as quitters, and without good reason. Indeed, I'd argue that Izzy's hang-up over being thought of as a quitter is largely why he's in the mess that he's in. He thinks he has to follow through with his goal, however silly and destructive it is, which I'll get to, just because in his view, there's something inherently wrong with quitting and something inherently virtuous with persistence. This is a bad way of looking at things. Izzy's first goal was to be an IPF world champion, which he failed to achieve. This goal was silly for several reasons, not the least of which, and I think we've covered it, is that he didn't have the genetics for it. But instead of criticizing his goal as silly, which it was, he criticizes himself for being unable to follow through with it.
In every sense of the word, it has been a miserable failure attempting to achieve that goal. In fact, the progress that I've made towards that goal is the deepest source of shame in my entire life. It is the biggest source of regret that I have in my entire life.
This is instructive. Izzy would have done well to care a little bit less about whether or not he achieves his goals, but rather what his goals actually are, and whether or not pursuing them or achieving them would be a net benefit. Let's concentrate on Izzy's second stated goal, which is to reach his genetic potential without qualification. He wanted to attain the biggest and strongest possible physique as an enhanced bodybuilder doing absolutely whatever it takes. This is a foolish goal. I mean, sure, as a natural, it's relatively easy to know if you're close to your genetic ceiling. It's the point where you see negligible increases in muscle mass and strength over a long time period, let's say a year, despite doing pretty much everything right. So, reaching your genetic potential as a natural is an achievable and measurable goal. But how do you know if you've reached your genetic potential as an enhanced lifter? How do you know that you can't bust through the next growth ceiling by raising your drug dosages or adding in another compound? The answer is, you don't. Because you can always grow just a little bit more by adding in more drugs and food, provided that your internal organs can handle it. So in that sense, Izzy's goal might have been achievable theoretically, but not practically without organ failure. So as with Izzy's goal of being an IPF world champion, he'd have done well to set a different goal. Izzy has made the judgment that the trade-off of his health for the attainment of this goal is worth it.
But if I trade, say, 5 years off of my life to chase my dreams, that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
But it's easier to believe that fantasy while you're still healthy than when your organs are failing. People like Izzy think that the question of whether you can live a good life or a long life is a dichotomy, that you have to pick one. It's 50 years as a lion or 100 years as a sheep. But this is a false dichotomy. You can live a good, long life, just as you can live a bad, short life. And making choices that'll shorten your life, such as overeating, smoking, or abusing drugs, doesn't somehow ensure that your life will be good or better. More the contrary. These are choices that not only shorten your life, but overall make it worse. Izzy claims not to care about philosophy, and just does what he feels like.
I don't think that much about philosophy. I don't think about what's the most moral way to live. I live the way that I want to live.
I know Izzy said this in passing, so it may sound as if I'm making a big deal out of nothing, But I consider this passing remark a window into Izzy's soul. Although Izzy claims not to care about philosophy, his 10-minute video justifying his decision to jump on gear tells us implicitly that he does. After all, the question of whether or not you should have used steroids is a philosophical one. Science tells us what steroids do, but it's philosophy that tells us whether or not we should inject them. So it's not that Izzy doesn't care about philosophy. He just tries to convince himself that he doesn't. This is what makes Izzy tragic. He's tragic because he thinks he's transcending some limit by ignoring philosophy and doing what he wants, when in reality, it's his decision to ignore philosophy and do what he wants that's limited him more than anything. Izzy's choices have confined him to a prison of his own making, of unnatural bulk and damaged organs, of regimented eating and injecting, moving around metal to indulge himself as would a child, pursuing a fugitive goal that only brought about injuries, disappointment, and a shortened lifespan. Philosophy could have prevented this, because philosophy, when properly applied, says no to bad decisions. There's a sense in which I like to punch up when I make YouTube videos. I don't like talking critically about someone who's a bit down on his luck or someone who's not very well known. So I confess I did have some misgivings making this video about Izzy, fearing that, from a certain standpoint, I'd be kicking a man while he's down. But at the same time, this video, and videos like it, have to be made. Because if I made yet another video about a famous and successful juicer, like Mike Israetel, which I've done by the way, then I'd continue to be part of the problem. The problem is survivorship bias. Survivorship bias is a logical error where you concentrate on things that passed a selection process while overlooking things that didn't, and it can lead us to incorrect conclusions because of incomplete data. To illustrate, consider this diagram that shows where World War II era planes were hit that managed to return home. Where should the planes be reinforced? Well, survivorship bias might erroneously lead you to conclude that the planes should be reinforced where the bullet holes are, since this is where they appear to have been getting hit. But this conclusion would be false, since you're not taking into account all of the planes that couldn't return home because they were hit in the cockpit or the engine or the propeller, where the damage is fatal. So, if anything, it's the areas that weren't hit that should be reinforced. Now, I believe survivorship bias occurs in the lifting world. In particular, I think consumers on social media can easily form an overly positive view about anabolic androgenic steroids. And that's because the algorithm only exposes you to the successful roiders, and by definition, they're the ones that got away with it. They're the survivors, if you will, the ones with great hair, incredible physiques, inhuman strength, fame, lots of money, and no ostensible health issues. These are the people whom Izzy idolized. And based on what you're exposed to on social media, you might erroneously conclude that you'll acquire these things yourself if you too take steroids. If so, then you'd be a victim of survivorship bias, as was Izzy. So to get an objective picture of what abusing gear does to most people, you have to take into account the failures as well as the successes. And that's precisely what this video intended to do, and why I think it's important to talk about Izzy. People only talk about the successes, but I argue that the failures have to be talked about. Because if they're not, then the myth of the successful juicer is perpetuated on social media to everyone's detriment. On social media, you don't see the corpses, the wannabes, the losers, but there are hundreds, thousands of them, thousands of unfortunate people who made stupid choices, whom you've never heard of because the juice never rewarded them the success they sought, and then they quietly slinked away in shame after wrecking their lives. The world should see that juicing isn't all sunshine and rainbows, and hopefully, I help toward that end with this video. We shouldn't let Izzy die, either literally or metaphorically. Izzy won't achieve his goal of being remembered as the guy who made more of his genetics than anyone else. But we'll be able to remember Izzy as something more. In particular, we'll be able to remember Izzy's journey as an instructive paradigm, a cautionary tale, if you will. And to Izzy's credit, that's in large part thanks to his honesty, openness, and integrity. Izzy had heroic ambitions that were tragically misplaced, because his self-defined goals led him to perdition. And if the fitness industry can't learn from his example, then too many good people will be doomed to rehearse tragedies like Izzy's in perpetuity.